Welcome to DeProgram. I'm Michelle Witte. I am here with John Kiriakou and Ted Rall. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Lots going on again this week. Most of the big news, a lot of the excitement is coming with regard to Ukraine, which we are going to talk about. We've got Luigi Mangione appearing in court today. This is Friday, appearing in like 2 hours for his New York State. This is related to the charges brought against him by New York State. The Pennsylvania one will be later, and then the federal one will be even later. He's accused of shooting and killing the CEO of United Healthcare, which we all remember. I couldn't possibly tell you if he did it or not. We are going to talk about a new pardon czar, which is some exciting news that I have just learned.
Very exciting.
Since, we won't know what happens in Mangione's court hearing, but I do have a little update on what United Health has been up to for the last couple of months. So that'll be fun. And yeah, then I guess we'll see what we get through. But you want to start with Ukraine?
Sure.
So,
go ahead, Ted. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Ted had some strong feelings.
Oh, well, I mean, let's put it this way, right? So right now, what everybody's talking about the contretemps, the war of words between Ukrainian President Zelensky and President Trump. And Zelensky, among other things, referred to Zelensky as a dictator because he hasn't held elections that were constitutionally required as of last spring. They also don't talk about the parliamentary elections have also been canceled due to the martial law that Zelensky declared. And so anyway, Trump called him a failed actor and said he liked him, but he just finds him, he's a bad leader for Ukraine. And so now there's all this talk about, on social media and elsewhere, Zelensky's not the dictator, Putin is the dictator, or Trump is the dictator. And, in all of this heated rhetoric, I was looking at all the coverage, especially on the op-ed pages of the major usual suspects like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and, the Washington Post. And what's notably absent is any voice that is skeptical of Ukraine or Zelensky. And regardless of where you stand on this, I wanted to look into it. The most recent Pew Research Center poll finds that 30% of Americans with a majority of Republicans being in that number, 54% of them Republicans and only 14% of Democrats, think that the United States is providing too much support to Ukraine. So that could include people who just think it's a little too much, could include people who say we shouldn't support at all, and a whole range in between. Anyway, none of those voices, 30% of the public, are just not reflected whatsoever in the in the media. I think it's just one more reason why people they look at the media and they don't see themselves reflected in there. And I mean, should exactly 30% of all pundits be skeptical of Ukraine? Maybe not, but when there's none at all, it sort of reminds me of Bernie Sanders. No pundit in the United States supported Bernie Sanders, even though about, again, 30% of the public supported overall, including both parties, wanted Bernie Sanders to be president. But, those people, they all look at the newspaper, they watch television, and they don't hear anyone, even invited on as a guest or as a contributing essay writer, to say like, yeah, hey, that Bernie Sanders, he's okay, or I'm not that into Zelensky. It really does contribute to an atmosphere of distrust.
Well, let me update. I guess we should talk about what's actually happened this week, which is that Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, and their teams met in Riyadh. Ukraine was not invited, which they did not enjoy. Zelensky objected strongly to that. But they came out, the U.S. and Russian sides came out of that meeting with relations restored, talking about plans for peace. Supposedly the Russians are very happy about it. Trump's team is very happy about it. You had Reuters reporting, I think this morning, that this is just according to their sources, but that there have been back channel communications going on between Trump's transition team and Russia in Switzerland for the last couple of months, which means this is not necessarily, I mean, if that's all true, that this is not necessarily coming out of nowhere. And you did have Trump react to that meeting with like pointed, and I'm going to say kind of unfair hostility toward Zelensky. Because in what you were talking about, Ted, in his long tweet about the, moderately successful comedian or whatever, yeah, I think this sort of question of whether or not there should have been elections held is a little more complicated. I mean, they are in a state of war, and martial law does call for them to be suspended. So whatever.
Yeah, but when the man who's running for re-election or would be running for re-election is the one who declares the martial law that prevents him from running for re-election, you do have to consider that fact.
Yes,
and the United States held an election in 1864 in the middle of the Civil War. Now, maybe it shouldn't have, but it did.
Yeah. But the more egregious really was saying that Zelensky personally wheedled the United States into sending Ukraine $300 billion, which again, like I'm not a Zelensky stan or something, but it's a little bit hard not to feel kind of sorry for the guy, because this was this was set up before he came on the scene, right? And so he's left, he's trying to literally, I think, trying to protect his hide here. I don't see how that is going to happen. I don't see how, I don't know how long Zelensky survives the end of this. But what I think is interesting also is that the Trump team is not just making the case that, listen, we're not sending troops to Ukraine. We don't want a NATO versus Russia situation. Therefore, there's no possibility for Ukraine to win, and we're tired of throwing money away, which would in itself be, I think, an acceptable reason to end a really destructive and costly, in terms of lives as well as property, war. But the Trump team is going all in on Ukraine started it, which I think is really, that to me is more interesting. Like there are some real, ideologue's not the right word, but there are some like real, people who have a thought out understanding of how this war started and are clearly sympathetic to the whole, it started in 2014, it started with Maidan, it started with the sort of US coup in Ukraine. I find that, I don't know, that's interesting to me, because that's, I think, would you guys say that's maybe a better position than just, come on, the writing's on the wall? I mean, it reflects a more, I mean, it's a Trump team, right? So we're probably giving them all too much credit, but it could reflect a more like, I think, truthful understanding of U.S. role in world affairs and what actually did happen, even if, again, it's absolutely untrue and unfair to say Zelensky started this war.
Right.
He's going to be a casualty of this war.
The problem, I think, for this marketing effort, and Trump is all about marketing, is that Americans are completely ahistorical, particularly about foreign affairs, particularly about countries that are not maybe, Britain and maybe France. They don't know anything about the Maidan uprising or anything about that. They can't identify Poroshenko from a lineup, right? There's no way. So, or Yanukovych or anyone else. So I think it reflects the research that some people on the Trump team have done. But I think it might definitely just saying, it's a loser. We're not going to win. Yeah. That's for the American public. That's the way out. Like that was kind of like the negotiation for getting out of Afghanistan. We've been there 20 years. We're not going to win. Forget it. Yeah. Leave them. I mean, everyone gets that. So, I mean, in terms of what's going to work for, I think, it's bitter medicine for Americans who've been kind of universally told that Ukraine is, a cause well worth supporting. And then suddenly it's like, wait, what's going on now? The guy who's just won and is more popular than he's ever been is pulling the rug out. Like,
it's funny to me that they're really sticking to this, though. Like today's headlines were that they are, they've had a G7 meeting and they're trying to come up with the G7 communique. And the US is pushing back on the same language that we've had for the last 2 years that describes Russia as the aggressor in this war. So like somebody cares about this stuff in that team. I don't know who it is, but someone is not just, I guess they don't just want to follow this sort of Trumpy path. It's just like, it's a loser, we're getting out of there, it's probably your fault. I like pilots who don't crash, whatever, Trump mentality. And I find that fascinating.
It is fascinating. There's clearly some people buried in Trump world who have that point of view. Look, just today, one of my longtime followers on my website was like asking me, Ted, what do you think? Did Russia start the war? Like, Russia started the war. They invaded. Ukraine provoked the war. That's what happened.
Well, and I guess I would say, I have a little note here to myself that Ukraine started it is going to go down easier than, sorry, our bad. The United States is the one who really did the provocation here.
Unless you want to count the the civil war in the Donbass and the shelling that started 8-9 years ago.
And there have been people on social media who have been pulling up CNN reports from 2014 on Kiev shelling the Donbass, very sympathetic reports about the Ukraine's central government shelling these eastern regions that have been the subject of so much consternation and the site of so much aggression. Who, again, felt that they were being disenfranchised by this sort of U.S.-led coup and decided to secede, and this sort of started this whole chain of events.
Throughout the former Soviet space, right, there's been this de-Russification movement going back to 1991, where many former Soviet republics did everything they could to make life as uncomfortable as possible for ethnic Russians, to encourage them to leave, including making Russian no longer an official language, or even banning it, or it's like, you should go. And that did happen in Ukraine as well.
Yeah.
And of course you had the help of the United States and a lot of NED money, USAID money,
Very much so.
Yeah. In the New York Times today, again, I feel really bad. I feel sad for Ukraine, right? I feel really sad for the regular people of Ukraine who've been caught in the middle of this, and then who are going to be the screwing's not going to end when the fighting ends. There was a interesting description in the New York Times about just how condescending the United States has become in its treatment of Ukraine, where they're describing. So I think we talked about this last week or at some point, that the Treasury Secretary has been along on a lot of these negotiations. And this is because, Donald Trump has decided that Ukraine should basically pay the United States reparations in the form of giving us rare earth minerals. And so apparently Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent shows up in Kiev, just pushes a piece of paper across the table towards Zelensky saying, you better sign this. Which just says, it's just like been written in Sharpie, give us half your minerals.
In perpetuity.
Yeah.
And then got angry when he said that he needed to pass this by lawyers, and he
didn't know
what the Constitution said about it. And,
yeah, which you would need to do.
Right.
He's saying, oh no, people are going to be really mad if you don't sign this.
Well, Zelensky's just the latest, and the Ukrainians are the latest to learn. The United States is a harsh mistress. The United States is a feckless lover, and when they come over to your corner of the world and they say, "We've got you, we love you, we take care of you forever," you can't believe them.
No.
They're one election away or one poll away from cutting you loose.
Yeah. I know, I guess we're sort of a way to, Europe is trying to pull together its response. I have no idea what it's going to be. I guess it seems Emmanuel Macron is sort of at the forefront of trying to get something together. I don't know what they can do. I don't know what their intentions are.
Using all of his political capital?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be out of work too.
There are going to be elections on Sunday in Germany. So I guess if anyone in Europe actually has political capital, it's Macron and I don't know where Maloney's been, just hiding out.
I don't even understand what the Europeans are on about. They were always junior partners in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. I mean, so what? They think they're going to do it all themselves, pick up where, don't worry, Trump's cutting you off, but you've got a new friend in France and Germany. Like, it's ridiculous.
Plus, don't they want that energy back? Right? Like, isn't Ukraine going to, or not Ukraine, isn't Europe going to win in the end of this by being able to get some Russian gas back?
And they'll get a new EU member out of it, too. Ukraine will join the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the plan.
I don't know. I don't know that I would be super excited about a totally broke, completely dysfunctional, absolutely destroyed country joining my club.
Remember pigs? Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain.
Pigs. I was going to say exactly the same thing. The Northern European countries bitched about the pigs, the so-called pigs countries, Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And then Greece's economy tanked. And even the other pigs countries had to bail out Greece. Well, Ukraine is far, far worse off than Greece ever was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's convenient to have a border state that Ukraine will basically become like a big Transnistria, like a buffer zone for smuggling and economic interaction between the Russian bloc and Eastern Europe. I really think that will happen.
One huge special economic zone, basically.
Yeah.
Again, not thrilled for Ukrainians in the middle of all this. Can I tell you also, this is like not hugely meaningful, but it just did catch my eye. This is in the New York Times from today. The headline is, Russia talks peace while troops threaten new region in Ukraine. And then the subhead is, Moscow's forces are 3 miles from Dnipropetrovsk, a province they have never invaded. If they cross in, the advance would be a morale blow to Ukraine and complicate any territorial negotiations. I just thought, a morale blow? Buddy.
Not that.
The morale's blown. I don't know where it is. My first reaction was to say, I don't even know why you're still fighting anymore. Honestly, you want to die on Ukrainian soil now? But I guess, this is Russia. This is a province that's next to Donetsk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they moved into this one.
This is about a land swap.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is.
But again, and of course, I guess any territorial gain is, benefits Russia, right? But I don't know. I fundamentally don't think that Russia particularly wants to try to occupy or take a bunch more territory in Ukraine. You know what I mean? I don't buy
trade. I think they want the Donbass to be as contiguous and complete as possible when this is all over. They want to come out of it with something that really feels like they have all of the Donetsk region, and then they're done.
Let me ask you, what do you make of all of this hollering? Because Trump came out ahead of these talks in Saudi Arabia and said, hey, Ukraine's not going to win. Russia has a battlefield advantage. They've got the territorial advantage. We're not sending troops. We got to talk. And everyone went, I forget what exactly people objected to, but they said, you're giving away all your bargaining chips. You're giving up the game. This isn't how you go into negotiations, by sort of already announcing what you're willing to give up.
I loved it because, everybody knows this dumb, show no weakness. Don't put any cards on on the table. Drag out the process. Be like Kissinger in 1972 and bomb the shit out of North Vietnam before you sit down for the Paris peace talk. That makes you strong. Look, we all know what happened in Vietnam anyway. A year later. So. Everybody, no one's stupid here. Zelensky, Putin, Trump, everyone knows what's going to happen. All Trump's doing is saying the quiet part out loud, getting it out of the way. If I'm Putin, I'm extremely appreciative of this. Russians are no nonsense people, very direct. Let's cut the bullshit and get down to it. And we all know what's going to happen here. He's not, Trump wasn't telling any secrets. I mean, I think honestly, it's this, it was refreshing. I would love to see world leaders be more direct and more honest, than Zelensky, who, up until a couple of weeks ago was talking about how we're going to take it all back, including Crimea. It's give me a break.
Yeah. And he truly said nothing that isn't known, right? Like if you read one article about this,
and that 100 other people hadn't said in national publications.
Yeah. I mean, there's no pretense. Does anyone really think that Europe actually wanted a NATO versus Russia war? You know what I mean? And you have bombs falling in like Belgium or whatever. Like, come on.
And Richard Blumenthal said yesterday on CNN, it was outrageous. He said that if we give Putin what he wants, the next thing to go is Poland. And after Poland is the Baltic states. And after the Baltic states is Romania. It's like, what planet do you live on, man?
0% chance.
Yeah.
0. How's Russia even going to do that?
Insane. They sound like it's again Vietnam. It's the domino theory all over again.
It is.
The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. You know, it's all in their fevered. It's in their fevered like worst fantasies, right? I mean, it's like Red Dawn's not real. Calm down.
Yeah. It's funny to me. I mean, I know Russia's a big country. It's a very big country, and has. I guess because it's such a big country, it has a kind of big population, although not for its size by any stretch of the imagination, like 144 million people. I think it's a kind of a strain for Russia to just administer Russia, right? It's got
Russia
nukes,
is not, they're not expansionist, right? I mean, they don't need
How could
land.
you possibly
One
be?
thing they don't need is land. They could do with less land. I
know.
That's why, like, even with the incursion into Kursk, they're like, whatever, we'll get it back later.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's like, and then, their strategy is to withdraw. And if you even look historically, right, the Soviet Union never invaded and acquired new territory. The last time the Russian state acquired additional territory was under the Tsar, and that was in the 19th century. I mean, it's not an expansionist country. It just hasn't been.
I just don't understand I also feel like you probably are overestimating Moscow's capabilities if you think it's going to take over and keep Europe. Like, I don't know
They don't want to.
No, I mean, they don't want to, but I don't think they could if they did want to. Right. You know what I mean? So they did have somebody in there who wanted to.
On the other hand, look at little Germany. Germany got a lot done in 1939, 1940.
They're smack there in the middle of it,
That's true.
It took over some states nearby them, and Germany's got like more than half the population of Russia. Like what, a tenth of the size?
Mm-hmm.
There was a study that was done recently too, based on Russian birth and death rates, and they said that the Russian birth rate is so flat, it's actually slightly declining. That by the year 2150. So 125 years from now, there will be no Russians. None.
Who?
Well, obviously, that's not possible.
Right.
Who will they be? But they're all, I mean, this is another story that's sort of ongoing that we talked about in the past. But like birth rates we like hit a birth rate cliff, apparently. Like globally, it's not just certain populations.
In the West,
Yes.
Which is interesting. I don't even think it's just the West. It's like, I mean, certainly in Asia, right?
Well, the
Japanese, they've been struggling for years in Japan.
The developing world has a nice high birth rate, but that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so, I mean, it's been, hey, maybe all these laid off feds can go and try and get jobs at the reopened Russian embassy, get like local hire jobs.
I got to tell you, 21 CIA officers were laid off yesterday. They were the 21 officers who had transferred into an internal office to work on DEI issues. So they were not transferred back to their old jobs or transferred to other offices. They were fired and escorted out of the building. This is the biggest layoff at the CIA since 1977.
Wow. And
the Washington Post today said that if the officers who are within their provisionary period are laid off, this will be the biggest layoff in the history of the CIA. Also, yesterday, both CNN and MSNBC reported that this coming week, Trump is going to fire as many as 17 generals, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the first 4-star female admiral to be the chief of naval operations.
What is the criteria? I forget. There was something that marked all those generals for firing. I can't remember what it was. Were they all Biden? appointees?
either promoted or commanded people who promoted DEI hiring.
And it's, again, like, there is some DEI stuff that is demonstrably silly,
Yeah.
but like a lot of people working on that are like working in good faith toward what I think are good ends, and there are
Yeah.
good ways to
Or
do
they were
this,
assigned
like
to
include
it, like the
it's sort of-
agents.
Or
it's
they
like,
were assigned to it.
yeah,
That's
and
right.
it
That's
applies,
not your fault.
No.
it applies to a lot of different categories of our fellow countrymen, right? It's not just like
Yeah.
putting unqualified minorities
No.
in jobs. It's ridiculous.
No, not at all.
So I feel bad because I know there are people who, yeah, I feel bad. But my sympathy has a pretty low ceiling because they are CIA officers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I
so
don't
it's
care,
funny, right? I
actually.
mean, on the one hand, 22, 22 can be a record high, but it's a low number. I mean,
Yeah.
considering
Yeah, it is, man.
the overall size of the agency. How many
Well,
people
the agency
work
is
there?
very much, it's still classified.
Oh.
I can make a guess.
Mhm.
I'm going to say it's probably close to 30,000.
Mhm.
Sounds like a lot of people. Well,
It's
I
a
guess
lot of people.
I guess the world's a big place.
Yeah, it is. The world's a big place.
You know?
But
Yeah.
like the FBI, they don't lay people off. They get bigger and bigger budgets every single year after year after year, bigger budgets, hire more people, do more things, expand your realm, as they used to say. It was all about kingdom building.
Let's talk about that, right? I mean, what about these Pentagon cuts that are being ordered?
I actually didn't believe it when I first read it. I had
Me
to,
neither.
when I read it,
Made
I
my
said,
head
"No, come on."
explode.
And then I looked for it somewhere else to confirm it.
Yeah.
Well, hasn't
8%
Hegseth
for
walked
each of-
that back?
8% for
Oh,
5.
has he?
I haven't heard that.
I
I
think
haven't
so.
either.
You explain it. I'll look it up.
It's 8% for each of the next 5 years. When you crunch that, that's a net 35% drop if it all happened.
Stunning.
But I guess some of it would be redirected towards new spending to reflect Trump's priorities, including an Iron Dome for America, which actually I laughed when I first heard it, but I think actually it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that could be, you could see why that would be expensive. Again, America's a big place. And by the way, does Guam get one? Do the
I
Marianas
know, right?
Islands
I
get
think
one?
they're on their own.
A little mini dome, a mini cup. I don't know. So, but I mean, the biggest proposed defense cut that I've heard any American politician propose is a 10% cut. Bernie Sanders proposed that once. You don't hear him say it very often. That's it. One time 10% cut. Even if, let's say, half of this ends up sticking and it's a net 20% cut, that's dramatic. The Pentagon gets funded every year so reliably that usually Congress sends them more money than they asked for.
Yes.
They get a tip.
Yes. Year after year after year.
Which
they
I don't
get
understand.
More money than they asked for.
Why do they send them more money than they ask for?
I guess these idiots in Congress want to show that they're tough on defense. Right? It's to protect America.
I'm looking this up because I swear to God, I saw something about Hegseth saying, "Oh, that's not really true," and whatever, like issuing a bunch of caveats.
The only caveat I saw was that some of it would be redirected to the Iron Dome.
Yeah,
but that would be domestic spending, which is cool.
Yeah, and by the way, it would be nice for
domestic spending.
After 9/11, I was
missiles all over the United States to
after
intercept
9/11,
incoming missiles.
Our Iron Dome or Israel's Iron Dome?
Ours.
We're going to make our own Iron Dome.
Oh, for God's sake! Who's shooting missiles at us?
Well, who knows? But it's the one thing. After 9/11, when we only had 12 Air Force National Guard planes on standby to defend the airspace of the 48 contiguous states. I remember thinking, why are we spending so much money on the military? They can't even, we've got hijacked planes flying around for over an hour and a half, and we know they're hijacked and we can't do anything about it. Really? It's absurd. For that money, we should be well protected.
I remember the Russians told us on like September 12th or 13th, they were absolutely flabbergasted that the Pentagon did not have surface-to-air missiles around it.
Yeah.
They couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that is astonishing, right?
Mhm.
It's completely astonishing.
They don't? I
No,
guess they do now. Do they now?
I don't think
not
so.
that I know of.
You do get rooted into the Pentagon parking lot a shocking amount if you try and drive in Northern Virginia. If you don't know where you're going, getting off some of the highways around Northern Virginia, you will end up in the Pentagon parking lot inevitably. It's very confusing around there.
Absolutely true.
I guess before we move on to talk about United Health and Luigi, do you want to talk, John, about somebody who did get a job in the Trump administration recently?
This is another one of those cases where I read it and I said, no, that can't be right. And then I went to AP and read it again. So Alice Johnson was named yesterday as the pardon czar, ignoring the fact that we have a U.S. pardon attorney. And I've written extensively, including day before yesterday, that the U.S. pardon attorney does nothing and pardons no one. So Donald Trump named Alice Johnson the pardon czar. Who is Alice Johnson? Alice Johnson is this 60-something African-American woman who was doing, life plus a million years for some drug charge. She came to the attention of
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian. Oh, I'm so glad that I couldn't remember her name. That's how important she is.
That's
in my life.
healthy.
Yeah, that's how important she is in my life. She came to the attention of Kim Kardashian, who raised her case with Donald Trump during the first term, and Trump pardoned her. She had already done 23 years for a first-time nonviolent drug charge and was going to die in prison. And so he freed her, which really was the right thing to do. And she has spent the intervening years really selflessly going out there and talking about the wrongheadedness of our drug laws and how many people are in prison when they shouldn't be in prison. So Donald Trump yesterday named her the pardon czar. He gave her an office in the old executive office building here in Washington, which is the executive office of the president. So when you say you work in the White House, 99% of the people actually work in the old executive office building. And now she is going to be in charge of recommending who should be pardoned. So I think this is a really great thing that Donald Trump has done. I talked to our friend Paul Wright day before yesterday. We didn't talk about Alice Johnson, of course, because this went public a couple of hours later, but we were talking about how still, after all these fits and starts in the direction of sentencing reform, we still have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. And that is just unacceptable.
Yeah.
Do we have 25% of the world's criminals? Like, are we that much more of a society of criminals than any other country is? Of course not. So, Donald Trump in his first term did the Second Chance Act, implemented the Second Chance Act, and now he named Alice Johnson as the pardon czar. So I'm really hopeful that things continue along this correct path.
Do you think this is in part? I mean, I'm always hesitant to try to psychoanalyze a person whom I've barely ever met, and that was decades ago, Donald Trump. But do you think this came out of his experience in the legal system, being booked and being the target of both civil and criminal investigations, and just understand and just beginning to feel that, like, and not to mention his friends and associates like Rudy Giuliani and so on.
In my own case, I was looking at being in prison until my 90th birthday.
Wow.
Donald Trump was looking at the same thing, regardless of the fact that he had been the president. And it weighs on you like an anvil hanging over your head. He put on a brave face.
Oh, yeah.
But, crazy things go through your head at night when you're laying in bed, realizing just how alone you are in the world. So I think that experience very much influenced his decision to look at these. And, he made a crack about Joe Biden a couple of weeks ago that nobody really paid attention to. Biden apologized for his role in the 1994 sentencing reform bill, which just made all sentences longer. But he didn't do anything about it. Okay, you're sorry you did it. What are you going to do about the 1 million black people that you put in prison?
Right.
You going to let them out? No?
Yeah.
Okay, then shut your mouth.
It's like Kamala Harris, where that guy that she sent to death row, she acknowledged that he shouldn't be there, but she never sent a letter as the former AG saying, please let this guy go, like a lot of prosecutors do when they become aware of a miscarriage of justice.
Exactly right. That's how my friend Mark Lanzalotti got out of prison. His prosecutor said, I lose sleep over this poor guy. First time nonviolent drug offense. He got triple life plus 30 years. And everybody else in the case got 5 years. He did 17. They finally let him out. But Joe Biden shepherding this bill through Congress and then Bill Clinton signing it, we went from 100,000 federal prisoners in 1994 to 200,000 federal prisoners in 2000. We went from 1 million prisoners nationwide in 1994 to 2 million prisoners nationwide in 2000. Somebody's got to take the blame for that. And that's Bill Clinton and Joe Biden. Joe Biden, who at the time happened to be the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where the bill originated. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. He's got to take responsibility.
Yeah, and and he's Catholic, right? Penance isn't about just saying you're sorry.
What a joke.
Penance is like, your priest
doing
tells you
about
go fix anything you can, reverse it.
That's right.
Make it right.
He said a lot of Hail Marys, Ted. That's what he's done. Should we talk about America's favorite prisoner right now? Luigi Mangione. Ben just sent us a tweet by a reporter who is down there who says it's like chaos, organized chaos in the Manhattan courtroom where he is supposed to show up. Chelsea Manning is there.
Lots of young women.
Yep. Well, that's for who have principles, Ted.
Yes.
But the reporter is saying there's, like 150 people there, way more than the first time around. I think proceedings are supposed to start at like 2:15. But, speaking of somebody who is potentially facing a very long time in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, there certainly is a lot of support there. And his lawyers, you guys saw that his lawyers set up a website where you can follow his case.
Yes.
Did you see? And then what's her name?
I wrote to him to request an interview. I'd like to, I do these series of graphic novel biographies. I would love to do one about him. So
did you see that? Website. Who is it? Caitlin Collins from CNN, their White House correspondent. She interviewed with Jon Stewart recently. Whatever. She shared the news that there was a website for Luigi Mangione, and a bunch of people got mad. Mostly right wingers got mad and said she was soliciting for him, sharing the website so that people could donate to his legal defense. And she got mad and deleted the tweet. But we're still fighting over speech on the internet, apparently.
I mean, I can't imagine. I'm very sympathetic, but I can't imagine how he's going to defend himself, or how there's any chance that the outcome is going to be anything other than guilty and a life sentence.
Well, I don't know if he shot this guy.
Well, I'll tell you, it
only been accused.
He hasn't denied it.
He hasn't denied it, but he's facing New York state charges and federal charges, as well as a more minor charge in Pennsylvania. Yeah. But the federal charge carries a death penalty.
Yeah, that was the purpose of it.
Yeah,
the Pennsylvania charge will probably just go away. Right?
Yeah, I assume that it will. They did it just to heap on and to make it easier to extradite him to New York. Right.
But I mean, I am at a loss as to what the defense will be, what it would look like. Even if you can establish that the victim is the worst, the worst, most reprehensible human being in the world. Right. The law doesn't let you whack the worst, most reprehensible person in the world.
Yeah. Can someone tell me what is going to happen? He hasn't issued a plea, has he? Or has he?
Yeah, he pled not guilty.
Okay, so this is going to be about sort of further setting up the case.
This will probably be about the case calendar.
Yeah.
All right. So, he's pled not guilty. He's not denying it, but he's pleading not guilty. They'll find some,
this is not one of those things like I did not do it. I'm innocent,
Mm-hmm. Well, who knows?
I wasn't there.
Maybe
I don't
that's
know
what they'll
anything
say.
about it.
I don't know who this guy is. I don't know who this beautiful man and all of these surveillance
It could be
photos
an
are.
OJ
Like, had a mask on,
It could be an OJ
They
type thing where
planted this
the,
this
the prosecution has such a hard on for him. They could fuck up the case. They could go
could.
too far.
Yeah.
And they have been doing that,
They could
right?
Mark Furman this,
I mean, they could they could Bill Cosby it or Harvey Weinstein it.
Right.
Like this has been a pattern. So, I mean, I guess let's cross their fingers that happens. Anybody who doesn't want to see this man executed for doing something that a lot of people.
I think he deserves like a year in prison.
Yeah, you shouldn't shoot people in the street. As
wrong.
he is alleged to have done.
He could have that bullet could have ricocheted and hurt an innocent person.
It could have hurt an innocent person. We're lucky that it didn't.
Yeah, seriously.
I have a little reminder of
reckless endangerment. That's what he should be found guilty of.
Yeah. I have a little reminder of what United Health has been up to. This is just in the last couple of months, right? So this is really just basically in 2025. And I have a couple of headlines. These are ones that have caught my eye over the last couple of weeks. There is a family, parents in Wisconsin, suing United Healthcare after they jacked up the price of the inhaler that their son used from $66 to more than $500. He didn't pick it up and then had a severe asthma attack, which killed him.
He had to choose between that and his rent.
Yeah.
So he chose the rent.
Now, it also is important to note here that this is, United Health and Optum RX, which is United Health's pharmacy benefit manager program, because United Health is slowly sort of buying up every single aspect of the U.S. healthcare system. So it's got its own sort of pharmacy arm. I will say, I think this lawsuit might be a little bit complicated because the kind of inhaler that we're talking about is not a rescue inhaler. It's something that if you have severe chronic asthma, you take it daily and it reduces your symptoms. Yeah, exactly.
I have asthma, so I know. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I remember wanting to try one of these kinds of inhalers years ago, but they were too expensive, so I didn't bother. So, I'm not sure. I hope that this family can sue United Health for an enormous amount of money. I think this will probably be kind of complicated, but no 22-year-old should not be able to afford their prescription, or have to choose between their prescription and rent. This guy lost his life. As far as I'm concerned, if you walk into a pharmacy and you can't afford your prescription because it's like quadrupled in price, and you walk out and you get hit by a bus, sue the insurer, fuck them. United Health has hired a defamation law firm to go after its critics on social media.
Oh, man.
There was a big uproar.
We better all look out.
I know, right? Well, there was a big uproar because there was this doctor in Texas, I think, who made a little video claiming that she had been called in the midst of surgery by United Health, and she had to scrub out of surgery and go because the surgery was trying to say that the insurance was trying to say that they hadn't actually covered the surgery and that they weren't sure about the overnight stay or whatever. And she sort of posts this video saying that this is totally ridiculous. It gets picked up by Bill Ackman and reshared. Bill Ackman, the big hedge fund guy and a huge Israel proponent. Mm-hmm. General sleaze, right? But
yeah, he's the one who leaned on Columbia University to fire its president for not being sufficiently censoring of pro-Palestine students on campus.
Yes. But I guess in one sort of good deed, he picked up on this and said, you should, I don't know if he actually said this, but he was like, United Health this is bad. This is a bad business. You shouldn't be doing this. And he has enough, I guess, influence or enough clout on social media that United Health hired this defamation law firm, Claire Locke. And so they're going after Ackman. Ackman deleted his tweet. And then you had a bunch of people. He deleted his tweet because he said he respected Claire Locke and thought they had integrity as a law firm. And then he had a bunch of people. I guess they were the ones who were defending CNN against the Coventry kids. Remember that? Where they
sure.
Ted, I remember you were really mad about this. CNN sort of covered a bunch of teenagers from some Kentucky Christian high school who were in DC for the March for Life.
Kentucky.
Covington High School.
Right across the river from Cincinnati.
That's right.
And filmed a sort of interaction between some of these kids and a native dude who was singing a song or something, and made it seem not exactly what it was, and made the students look really bad. And they won that defamation lawsuit. So yeah, United Health extremely concerned about its image online.
It should be.
Yeah, they should be. They were just found to have overcharged some cancer patients for drugs by more than 1,000%. They are in the midst of trying to get the Securities and Exchange Commission to help them avoid these votes that have been proposed by shareholders. One is that they use a third-party auditor to assess previous denial claims, particularly where a death was involved, to determine if the denial letters included factually incorrect and insensitive information. And if that was included, if there was something wrong, to have the CEO hand sign an apology letter to families. So they're saying we don't want to allow shareholders to vote on that. They are also saying they don't want to allow this proposal that would recommend that United Health evaluate how company practices impact access to healthcare and patient outcomes, including analyses of how often prior authorization requirements or denials of coverage lead to delay or abandonment of medical treatment and adverse events for patients. So they don't want to have that either. Their defense, I think, in the first case is, sorry, guys, you didn't get that in under the deadline. They missed a deadline by a week. Their defense to the SEC about the second one is just that it's too vague and they couldn't possibly analyze the public health related costs of their practices. Also, they basically say denial of care is our entire business practice, and so this is like unallowable micromanagement.
They should really sue themselves for defamation.
They should. And then finally, this is just today from the Wall Street Journal that the DOJ is investigating Medicare billing practices at United Health. The Wall Street Journal had been reporting on this for years, before and after Brian Thompson was shot in the middle of Manhattan. What the DOJ is probably looking into is that because Medicare, I guess, allows insurers as well as doctors to add diagnoses to patients. So of course, insurance companies and United Health, they use software to look through patient records and decide what diagnoses they might have that would be lucrative. And then they send nurses out to patients' houses to quote unquote confirm these, including through using non-FDA approved tests. So you have a bunch of patients who could not physically possibly have the ailments that United Health or other insurers are charging the government for. They also are looking into what the Wall Street Journal found, that when patients moved from traditional Medicare to United Health Medicare Advantage plans, they appeared to acquire many previously undiagnosed maladies and got an average of 55% sicker. Hey, Ted, do you want to remind us about the difference between Medicare and Medicare Advantage?
Right. So I'm not old enough. I'm going to turn 62 later this summer, but I'm not old enough to be in Medicare. But my understanding about Medicare Advantage is that it gets a lot of negative reviews from older patients. And basically what it's sold at is sort of a cheap alternative, a way to hedge your bets. And basically the idea is you pay a flat rate, and that rate might tick up or it might tick down, but it's sort of like level billing for your utilities, kind of. And then you're supposed to be broadly covered for everything. But that's how it's sold. But the reality is the denials are crazy. So what they want, what a lot of insurers have been doing, allegedly, United Healthcare, a defamation team, allegedly, is that they've been basically telling the government, Ted Rall has, every disease. He has all the diseases. But then when Ted Rall goes to his doctor to get treatment, all the denials, right? So they just don't pay. So they're collecting more and more for the government, and they're not paying out. And a lot of people have been denied some really essential care. People have gotten, deadly diseases, and some people allegedly have died because Medicare Advantage did not cover them.
And also, I mean, isn't the difference that, Medicare pays, if you have a Medicare plan, Medicare is paying your doctor. If you have an Advantage plan, the government is paying the insurer that manages that plan.
That's
so
right.
It's the insurer is absolutely incentivized to, create as many diagnoses for you as possible, because they can then turn around to the government and say, look, we got this really sick guy, we need some more money. And also incentivized to not treat you for any maladies that you may actually have.
Exactly.
Yeah. They get these lump sum payments. I have a question here, because this is just according to the Wall Street Journal's sources. It's sort of they're exclusive. They say they've been told that the DOJ is looking into United Health by people familiar with the matter. But later in the piece, they say this is a civil fraud investigation. And I don't know why it's not criminal. And I'm not a lawyer, so I went and looked up difference between civil fraud and criminal fraud, to try and sort of see if I could figure this out by myself. But it kind of seems to me like, one, part of what would usually make a case criminal fraud is that the case is being brought by local, state, or federal prosecutors. So it's not a person. Again, we don't know because nothing has been filed yet. But the DOJ is looking into it. Makes it seem like it's not Joe Smith saying I've been defrauded. It is, and of course, if you're talking about fraud through Medicare Advantage, it would be defrauding the government, right? So I'm confused. I don't know why this isn't criminal. It's going to be a lot of money also. I don't know.
I have no idea.
I don't either. I'm just wondering if the theory is that the charges are being brought against a company rather than against the executives as individuals. I'm just spitballing. I have no idea.
Maybe. I feel like I want more criminal fraud cases. I want more criminal fraud
seriously.
cases brought against these companies. Although I guess, the burden of proof is lower if it's civil. So maybe that is part of it.
True.
But I don't know. Seems like you ought to be able to get United Health on something. It does seem like they
are. I mean, did you guys know that they are bigger than Chase Manhattan Bank or Citigroup?
Oh my God. No, I did not.
They're
know
enormous. That. They've eaten up so much of the U.S. healthcare industry over the past decade, over the past probably 20 years.
They're bigger than the biggest American banks.
Yeah. I mean, healthcare, this is sort of a longer conversation that I would like to have, but I have been doing a little bit of reading. There's a column in FT, and then there's another, Adam Tooze wrote it up. But healthcare is a huge part of our economy. As everybody knows, we are very sick, and we are very sort of angry, and we are very stressed out about our healthcare system, but a ton of money goes into it. And so even when you look at the health of the US GDP, something like a fifth of it, a ton of it is just because we have jerry-rigged this weird healthcare system that doesn't do anything except make and generate money. So
it's to coin a word, sick.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I mean, it's in addition to not helping Americans achieve better health outcomes, it is kind of, I don't know. I mean, we had a conversation earlier this week about behind all the smoke and mirrors and behind all the curtains, where is the real economy? And how much good does it do anyone really to have a great looking GDP if 20% of it is based on ensuring that your population is, tired and sad and fat and dying and, riddled with fatty liver disease and, dying in childbirth and whatever. That's not It's not contributing to anybody's well-being.
Yeah, well, it's kind of analogous to like the military-industrial complex, right? I mean, it's like the most devastating thing that can happen to it is if two maniacs sit down and sign a lasting peace. God help us all. And and it's the same thing here. I mean, imagine if, say, RFK Jr. turns out to be, a messiah, and he does make America healthy for the first time.
Be assassinated.
Not again.
He will be assassinated.
Right. Well, it's not like that's ever happened to a Kennedy before. So,
jeez, yeah.
That's very I mean, in a weird way, there's a lot about Trump that I really hate, but I do like the disruptive factor. That part's great. And, I don't see any mainstream Democrat or Republican. I don't think President Bernie Sanders would have gone as hard on nutrition, big food and all that. I just don't think so.
Yeah, I think today we're having a conversation that touches on a lot of the possible good things that the Trump administration might do. We're going to have to come back to laying off all the National Park Service workers and taking over the Postal Service.
Deporting people to Guantanamo.
Yeah, we'll have to catch up on that maybe.
Yeah, the Postal Service is already good and fucked up from the from his first term, and that ridiculous postmaster that he appointed that we're still stuck with. And now, what's with Trump wanting to take it? I really feel like that might be the end of the Postal Service. I mean,
and congestion pricing, Ted.
Oh, well, I mean, if he kills congestion pricing, that'll be very, I'll be happy about that.
You know what I
hate congestion pricing.
I have heard that New Yorkers actually have come around to it. I'll let you be the man on the ground. I've heard some reporting. There were a lot of people who were initially opposed to it, didn't want to pay, whatever, but that actually it has made a difference in like travel times, ease of getting around the city and getting in and out of bridges and tunnels, and that people actually it's going to be an unpopular move. But I'm here in Washington, D.C., so what do I know?
Your mileage will vary depending on where you live and what you do. So, for example, for Uber drivers, it's a blessing, because one thing people aren't aware of, every time you drive into the zone, you only get charged once a day. So let's say you're an Uber driver, you're in and out of that zone all day long, you just get dinged the $19 fee, right? But the thing is, there's all sorts of, so some people report, like I have a friend who lives by the Queens Midtown Tunnel entrance in Manhattan, and she has to keep her windows sealed and air conditioning running in the dead of winter because there's so much car exhaust from where she lives.
Wow.
That said, she says, oh, this is great. There's like no traffic. It's in and out of the tunnel. My pollution situation is really solved. But then I know people who live in the 70s, and the border is 60th Street and below. People who are living in the 70s and 80s on the east and west sides of Manhattan report that the traffic is absolutely out of control from people who are trying to park north of the congestion zone and then take buses or subways south into the congestion zone. So I think that the fact is it's too early to tell. And I'll tell you, I don't like it because it's a regressive tax and I'm just against those. But here's the part that I don't get. So either this works as a deterrent for people driving into Manhattan south of 60th Street, or it doesn't. If it works as a deterrent, the city doesn't collect any money at all, and then the subways don't get any funding. If it doesn't work, and then the 60th Street is still full of people, full of traffic, but there's tons of money coming in to fix the subways. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's weird, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's almost like you kind of, if you want the money, then you don't want it to work. But if it works, it's not going to do what you said it was going to do, which was to give money to the subways.
Is it? Yeah. I mean, I guess, does it mean the state is going to be collecting money that then can be put into the subways?
That's what they were claiming. Although no New Yorker believes that the MTA will get that money. There's a long history of bridge tolls and all sorts of revenue enhancements that have allegedly were targeted for subways and expansion and modernization. And every time there's a fiscal downturn, they loot that money. They can't help themselves.
Speaking of feckless New York State governors, what now? You were thinking you were calling for Eric Adams to be dismissed from office by New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who has not done it yet.
No.
Do you think she is? I mean, because now we talked about the resignations last week, right? Of prosecutors, like half a dozen people in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office resigning when they were told to drop the case, the corruption case against Eric Adams. Then you had Eric Adams yucking it up with the Department of Homeland Security head, laughing at how funny it would be if Adams was not enforcing Trump's immigration policies enough, and
Tom Honan.
Yeah, Tom Honan would come down and be badgering him.
Climb up his butt. He said, I'll get up your butt.
Because that's our deal, everybody. We'll drop these charges against you, not because there's no evidence for them, but because we want you to enforce these potentially unpopular immigration policies, which theoretically be kind of bound to enforce anyway as the mayor.
Well, no, but New York has New York's a sanctuary city.
Yeah, correct. Still in power, as far as I know.
I just dug up an old quote from Rudy Giuliani from 1994, where he was enthusiastically supporting the sanctuary city law. Just saying. So the two main developments there are that the governor, who's the only person besides Eric Adams himself who can remove him from as mayor before the election, she says she wants to appoint some kind of surveillance force. She's hiring a squad of people to basically she's like the teacher, you know how sometimes the teacher takes the disobedient child and forces him or her to sit next to her, like pull their desk right up next to hers. Don't be in the back anymore. That's what she sees. She's like, I am watching Mayor Adams very carefully to make sure no more bad behavior. It's absurd. Obviously, she's got a lot of pressure, from New York Democrats to cut him loose. And look, she's politically aligned with him. She's understandably reluctant to get rid of the second Black mayor in New York City history. And the first one was not reelected and was not really considered successful, David Dinkins.
Yes.
And so that's kind of bad. And she points out that this law has never been used to remove a mayor of the city of New York. I did a dive on this. I think he's objectively the most corrupt mayor we've ever had in New York City, which is saying a lot. And also, it's worth noting that Jimmy Walker, the very colorful, corrupt mayor of New York City in the early 1930s, there's even a musical about him back in the 1960s. He was pushed out under this law by Governor FDR. He didn't have to actually pull the trigger. He said, like, if you don't resign, I'm gonna remove you. And this was during the 1932 election when Governor Roosevelt was running for president for the first time. And Walker was like, okay, he agreed and decided to go on tour in Europe, and that was it. So, I mean, effectively, he was like, Nixon wasn't impeached, but he was forced by the threat of impeachment to resign. That's exactly what, that's what happened to Walker. So it's not without, it really, wouldn't be totally unprecedented.
I will say, according to the rules of succession that I have looked up, yes, I can see Hochul not wanting to dismiss the city's second Black mayor, but he would be replaced by the person who would become the third Black mayor.
Acting mayor. So
Jumaane Williams.
Jumaane Williams would be, who's very left wing.
Yes.
Very progressive. He would become the acting mayor for 60 days, and then there would be a special election. Now, we're due for a Democratic primary in June anyway for the mayor. And I'm sure that part of the governor's calculus is, why not just kick this can 4 months down the road and just let the voters decide? In New York City, a Democratic primary determines the winner of the mayor's race. As much as I would love to see Curtis Sliwa perhaps become governor of the mayor of New York, I don't think that's going to happen. I like Curtis. I've met him. I like him. But it's like, I don't think so. So she might just be thinking that. Let's just wait and see.
apparently, if Adams stays in office till within 90 days of the primary, then there wouldn't be a special election.
Oh.
And then Williams would be acting mayor until November.
Ooh, interesting.
Which might give him a chance.
So maybe she's just thinking, oh, I'll put him on double secret probation for a month or two, and then bam.
Hire all the prosecutors who resigned to tail him.
Although I don't think she's a big fan of Jumaane Williams, but on the other hand, they could have a phone call, reach an understanding.
No, she'd rather install Mike Bloomberg or something.
Yeah.
Since when have centrist Democrats preferred to replace somebody with a left winger than a right winger?
New York's left-wing mayors have been very successful, though. Mayor Lindsay, for example.
Yes, that's true.
I got no memory.
It's a left-wing city. It needs a left-wing mayor.
Yeah, I wish you luck.
We're not going to get one.
Bring in what's her name, Cynthia
Nixon.
Yeah, Cynthia Nixon.
Oh, she's dreadful. We don't want her.
No.
You don't like Cynthia Nixon?
No, never did.
No, I don't care for her either. I think she's dumb as a stone.
I don't know anything about it. I just remember that she ran.
Yeah.
I mean,
I liked the idea of her, but then when you pay attention, you're like, oh my God.
All right, guys. We got anything else? Eating ourselves up?
Well, and one last development is that the judge in the Eric Adams case, who has been considering the DOJ's, he held a special hearing, required the DOJ to, this really surprised me. Ron Kuby, the lawyer, he told his Facebook feed that I'm a member of that he thought this case would just vanish because if the prosecutor decides to drop a case, that's it. There's nothing, there's no argument against it. The judge isn't liking the smell of it. The judge called a hearing and now has hired an attorney to represent against the motion to dismiss, because up until now it's just been the DOJ by themselves, right? There's no side that says that's been arguing in favor of continuing with the prosecution.
And do you remember who that happened to before? Someone was pointing this out. That's what happened to Stephen Donziger.
Oh.
So there is precedent for a judge saying,
who lives right across the street from me.
Hire a private, getting out and about more now than before. There is precedent for a judge saying, if our prosecutors don't want to take it, you go ahead and hire yourself a private prosecutor to bring this case up, which would be a pretty, interesting inversion of the Donziger case, which of course we talked a lot about. But that
case is insane.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible.
It's one of those things that when you read it, you're just like, wait, that happened?
Yeah. Should we recap it for people?
Yeah.
Just in case.
Yeah, go ahead.
He was an environmental lawyer. He worked with communities in Ecuador and successfully brought a massive case there against Chevron, right? Chevron was found liable, ordered to pay lots and lots of money to these communities.
Over $1 billion.
And Chevron went after him. They went after him, I think, in Canada. They went after him in the United States in a sort of precursor to what we might be seeing now. Prosecutors declined to prosecute the case. They found, it clearly found it to be like not winnable or without merit entirely. But the judge allowed a attorney to be hired to prosecute this case. It was an attorney who had ties to Chevron. Donziger refused to hand over his phones and documents. He was found in contempt of court.
Because of attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, he was found guilty of contempt of court, put on house arrest for days. I mean, it's eaten up. It's been this process that I just recapped in 30 seconds. It's been, for years. But this process took decades.
He was right across the street, couldn't leave his apartment.
I think the Ecuador victory was in the 90s or something. Yeah. It's been a long, long, long process that he has been very commendably.
They sent him to jail.
Yeah, they sent him to jail. Then they put him under house arrest. He was under house arrest for more than a year.
What a fucking embarrassment for the system.
Yeah,
truly.
It would be, again, this would be interesting to see a replay that. I mean, I support this case against
disappointment
Adams,
would be for the greater good.
Yeah.
My instinct is that this judge is, I'm not sure, but I would say more likely than not to not drop this case. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Otherwise, why go through all this?
Yeah, I think he doesn't want to, or he does want to, but he wants to have a sort of airtight reason.
He thinks it smells. I mean, and it does.
It does smell. I mean, it doesn't even smell. It's like
It
very
reeks
obviously
to high
just,
heaven.
it's
Yeah.
just political coercion,
Yeah.
right? Which is not supposed to be a reason that you're supposed to drop a case,
In
even
public.
according to the new attorney general.
Yeah, in plain day.
Yeah. Is he going to do what, use the mechanisms he has available to him to keep the case going?
Well, then, what I don't get is who prosecutes the case if you can't get a willing, if you can't really.
Well, somebody will be
force the
willing. They'll just pay for him. I mean, that's what happened in the Donziger case. They just find someone, and then I guess you pay for that. Like the state pays. I'm not positive, but somebody gets paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I'm sure they could find somebody to bring the case.
Sure.
If people have enough backbone to resign, someone will have enough backbone
plus,
to argue it.
Adams has probably got his approval rating is probably 8% now. So
yeah, and it seems like a pretty strong case. Again, haven't seen his defense. It's still only accused.
He hasn't bothered to deny it.
No, he hasn't. All right. We've not nearly covered everything in the world. We still got Gaza to talk about sometime down the line, but that's I think the deprogramming we have for today, right?
It is.
All right.
Yeah,
there will be more. There will be more for next time. In the meantime, though, bye.
Bye,
Ciao.
everybody.